Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's panel discussion that is how security plays a fundamental role in digital transformation and IoT edge endpoints, hosted by IoT Solutions World Congress and Industrial Internet Consortium. A special thank you to our sponsor for today's webinar, Generalitat de Catalunya, the Government of Catalonia, Ministry of Digital Policy and Public Administration. So during this session, we will have a discussion around various aspects, which include why security and trust are critical for digital transformation and also for IoT edge endpoints. Some of the biggest challenges in IoT security, along with the role of assurance in IoT adoption and digital transformation. Key security considerations and how to build security. And once you have done that, how do you know that you have good enough security? And most importantly, changing perceptions of security both from an OEM and consumer perspective. And finally, we will be dedicating time to your questions today at the end of the webinar. So if you have questions for our panelists, please submit them by typing into the chat or questions tab on your dashboard. We have a very knowledgeable and experienced panel today with us, which includes Fabio, who is the head of Product Security Digital Solutions Division with Signify, Jan, who is the head of Digital Product Security with Osram, Jivon is the CEO of Digital Sigma Delta Technologies, and David is the Director Secure Device Ecosystem with ARM, a PSA certified co-founder. So please feel free to introduce yourself to our panelists and fellow attendees via chat. Also reach out to any of our panelists on LinkedIn or Twitter. We will be conducting two polls today during our webinar. The questions appear in the polls tab on your screen on the right-hand side. Please provide your responses by answering these questions when you have a moment during this discussion. There is also a download button at the top of your dashboard where you can download a PDF copy of the today's presentation slides. This webinar will also be available on demand at the conclusion of this session, and a link will be emailed to you. So with this, let me start with you, Jan. In fact, I was looking into Osram website, and it talks a lot about digitalization. In fact, it specifically says that digitalization opens a variety of new possibilities, extending far beyond a simple on and off of light sources. For this, could you help us to understand what digitalization means to you and Osram?
So, as you're likely aware, Osram is a pretty traditional company. It existed for over 110 years now. And for the longest part of its life, it really basically just provided light in terms of lights on, lights off, or lights present, or lights not present. But the digitalization really extends to, well, first of all, this very basic control features, but also a lot of governance features, which are really interesting for the people who need to use light control systems. So such information as burn times, maintenance hours, people really spend a lot of money on tracking the run times of their lights. And this is something where the digitalization can help greatly in tracking how many hours are on the specific devices and so forth. And it gets really interesting because very often there are new opportunities which come from combining the active lighting functionality together with other digital functionalities, such as, for instance, tracking whether there are currently people in a room through an infrared sensor, checking whether there's motion in the room, which of course also brings about interesting privacy and security questions and so forth. So digitalization really is tantamount to bringing the company into the next century.
Interesting. Now let's go to Fabio. Fabio, one of the statements which caught my attention was, within Signify, we turn light sources into points of data to connect more devices, places, and people through light. contributing to a safer, more productive and smarter world. So it might be interesting to hear what digital transformation mean to Signify.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, good evening. My name is Fabio Vignoli. I'm the head of product security for the professional side of Signify. And yes, it is a very good point, similar to what Jan was mentioning a second ago. Signify started as a very traditional company, more than 128, I think, years old, and we part. Yes, we used to be called Philips Lighting, and Philips Lighting went through a number of different transitions from conventional lighting to LED lighting. Recently, we started very much into creating systems. Systems, of course, make use of most of the digital capabilities of 2000 and above. Huh? And from systems, we also move towards managing also information that comes either through sensors from our luminaires, but also using the capabilities that the light itself has of delivering and receiving information. And we're talking about things like coded lighting, where we share informations by modulating the light that can be read by a camera, for instance, a mobile phone, to identify the position of a person within a certain area indoor, which is different than the outdoor kind of mapping capabilities, but also using the light as a form of communications with Wi-Fi, which basically allows modulation of lighting to convey information in a highly secure way, because, for instance, you can imagine that lighting is restricted to a certain area if you don't have windows, of course, and differently than radio that can propagate through walls to a certain extent. Lighting is restricted to that. So basically, we're trying to make use of our experience and expertise in the lighting area to move beyond typical lighting application, switching on and off lighting, and to more advanced applications. Some of them are already mentioned by Jan, like identifying people in the room, trying to figure it out how to manage this kind of activities, but also communications and location.
Yep, interesting. So now coming to you, Jivon, I believe Sigma Delta work across various industry verticals, and you also build solutions with various use cases like smart appliances, smart utility, medical, mobility, and even you get into machine learning on the edge, right? So what
Yes.
digital transformation mean to Sigma Delta, and what are some of the biggest challenges?
Well, digital transformation means a lot to us, but it also means a lot to our customers. So to introduce what Sigma Delta does, we are basically ultimate IoT partner for our customers. So like we help our customer build their devices. We are their sometimes OEM or ODM for them. Also, we provide cloud services for them. In addition to that, we are also Pelion, AWS, Azure partners. So, well, I see lots of changes in the market now, like lots of traditional manufacturers who were not necessarily electronics developers. They now really want their products to be connected to cloud. Like we work with mobility, automotive companies, home appliance manufacturers, metering device manufacturers. We sometimes work with Air Force, and like before IoT, like they had products that need to be just managed by human all the time. But well, they now want digital transformation so that their devices can be controlled and managed remotely. So that's we are providing that any service that's required for achieving that mission. And yeah, that's what why our customers are looking for digital transformation solutions.
I believe it might not be an easy journey because you work across different verticals and each vertical has got a different requirement, right?
Well, so that's why we work very closely with customers. So for example, we know almost nothing about mobility. So mobility side and the know-how that's actually provided by our customer. but we give them consulting services and listen to what they need and what they want. And then we design the security and the cloud solutions and connectivity solution for them. So it's not easy, but yes, well, we try our best.
Excellent. So now coming to you, David. David, I know you were involved in journey from mobile to IoT. So again, it will be very interesting to hear your views as what digital transformation mean to you, and what's your view around scaling challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Anurag, and it's great to be joined by Sigma Delta, Signify, and Osram as well. I think it's a great reflection of digital transformation, actually, that we're here talking about. You know, I guess the humble light bulb in a digital context and connecting it to cloud services. And I think that's a good example of how, you know, we're in an era where, you know, the way that efficiencies and services are delivered is just fundamentally changing, and it's changing across all industries. You know, that's what we recognize. And I guess as a quick introduction to ARM and also to PSA certified. So I lead the secure devices ecosystem team at ARM. For those that are not so familiar with ARM, we are a leading intellectual property supplier. So we license effectively blueprints that go into a system on a chip. Pretty much everything you can touch, actually, that's electronic has ARM in there in some way or another. So ARM has been around for, in fact, we're just about to celebrate our 30th birthday. So ARM is 30 years old. Huge footprint in mobile, huge footprint in embedded. I think what's fundamentally changing in embedded is that you are connecting devices to the internet, and that's really reflects the digital transformation agenda. The fact that, you know, you look at a device that traditionally wasn't connected, and now through using new processes and new methods of connectivity, you're able to release more potential from that device and enable more services. And I think we'll come on to talk about that, you know, a little bit later on with the others. So ARM, with its partners, are right at the center of that. So that's the chip industry building devices that are capable of connecting. It's the OEMs, so it's suppliers such as Sigma Delta and others that are able to build products with those chips that connect. And then it's the end, I guess, OEMs that are able to consume that technology and turn that into valuable businesses as an extension to their current model. So we see a huge kind of inflection point where devices are connecting. It's kind of like what we went through, I guess, with mobile about 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Only we're going through that with everything else now. We've been talking about machine to machine and IoT for a long time, but actually, you know, what we should be talking about is digital transformation and the ability to connect services, and devices enable those services. So that's, I guess, that's the context setting for ARM. With regards to PSA certified, so ARM is a co-founder of PSA certified, and we set that up with 4 of the leading cybersecurity labs. So we have UL, Riskier, Brightsight, and CAICT. And collectively, it's an independent scheme. It's not only for ARM. And it certifies devices to show that they've followed security best practice. And, you know, really, digital transformation is about delivering services in a digital way. And by definition, because they connect to a cloud, they become, you know, effectively an enormous attack footprint. And so companies such as, you know, Osram, Signify, you know, others will care a lot about making sure that those devices are secure, so that their businesses are secure in the way that they're deployed.
Yeah, and that's very interesting, David. When you talk about connecting devices to the internet, the thing that it's getting very complex nowadays, right? Devices are not only connected, but they're talking to each other. They're interacting with each other. In fact, they're doing businesses with each other, right? And in fact, they're providing data, and then they're providing services around that. And everything is growing or is scaling at an exponential rate, right? And that brings a lot of challenges. So what's your view around those?
So scale is the right word. So we kind of have this vision towards 1 trillion connected devices, and I think that's, you know, entirely reasonable. We are moving to a world where, you know, devices connect in the same way that we've come used to our sort of our cell phones, our mobile lifestyle. Everything will connect, and so the way that we approach that really is around scale. and the ability to scale. So first of all, in order to achieve scale, you need to have confidence. You can't scale a market if you're not confident in the technology. So security underpins that. It's a foundation of scale. It's like, having trust that your braking system works on your car. You're not going to drive your car if you're not sure whether or not it'll work. And I think security is about delivering trust. It's allowing the markets to scale. And really, it's about having effectively a zero-touch life cycle as well for the device. So the devices are created, deployed, they are maintained with as little human interaction as possible in order to achieve that scale. And we, as an industry, we recognize that in order to kind of deliver on that digital transformation agenda, you have to adopt technologies and work in a collaborative way in order to allow scale. And I think security is kind of a very good example of that, where aligning on common practices, best practices, aligning on how secure services are used within a device allows manufacturers to then deploy with confidence and achieve that scale.
Yeah. Thanks, David. That's a good segue to a next question. So let's start with Fabio this time. So Fabio, we had a great discussion on digital transformation. So help us to understand why security matter for organizations. If you see connected devices industry has been around for a long time, right? So what took so long to get the security conversation started?
Wow, that's a question. It will take probably a couple of hours to answer. So, we started, at least for us. Let me talk about from the Signify perspective. Until, let's say, 20 years ago, we were building luminaires and lamps. And for us, security, it wasn't an issue. It wasn't a problem. Cybersecurity was not a problem. However, as we moved forward with starting with safety was an issue, not security. As when we moved forward with IoT, even before IoT was even a name, we started with deploying our first Interact Seat installation in around 2008, 2009 time period. IoT wasn't even a name, and at that point in time, you have this, and Interact City is an installation, is a system that allows a municipality to control many luminaires in a street, in the road. Basically, it's street lighting. Each of the luminaires is connected to our cloud solutions, and there's a GPS, and there is a communication and control that goes back and forth between the luminaires and the system in the cloud. At that point in time, we suddenly realized that, security is going to be a little issue here. So we really need to get our acts together and start really understanding what security means for lighting, understanding what security means for IoT systems, and understanding how we improve the way we address security within the organization. I think it is late, and it is addressed late by the company and for us as well. The first time we put our installations out, we didn't really think about security. Security came the moment that you have the installation in the field. You think, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? Of course, it's a long time since 2008, so we have learned our lessons. But it comes late because it adds cost, it adds complications, and sometimes it's perceived by business as a hindrance and as something that slows down the development. So if you look at from that perspective, I think that's probably some of the challenges that also others have had.
Yeah, very good. So what's your view, Jibon, around this?
Well, why security? So as I said, SDT helps customer build hardware products, but not just one or two products. Like we build like tens of hundreds of connected products, and those are valuable assets of our customers. So obviously security matters, because like, if you lose one of them, it actually affects their connected services. And the trend we see now is that a lot of customers are operating lots of connected, the services running with on the lots of connected devices. So yeah, that's why I see security matters in that way.
Yeah. So Jan, I believe you have looked into, I would say, both into process and product-based security. So would be good to hear your views around security and why it matters.
Security
And why it matters.
Sorry, you were breaking up on my end. I'm sorry.
So your views around security and why it matter.
So first of all, just to state the obvious, we screwed it up in the first wave of IoT. You know, back then, really everybody was just happy to get things running, and they were like, "Oh, look, it's cool, a coffee machine where you can remotely see whether it's brewing coffee or not." You know, and everybody was just happy to have things connected to the internet or to the network at all, and was just super excited that it worked. The fact that security also matters for seemingly innocuous devices such as digital light switch or whatever only really came to people's consciousness because stuff actually happened. You know, like I remember at least one case where in after a successful attack on a Las Vegas casino, the data was exfiltrated through a smart fish tank. You know, so things like these had to happen first before people actually woke up and understood that it can be a problem when we bring these devices onto corporate networks or civil infrastructure, military networks, without thinking about security. You know, it's not a secret that I was a penetration tester and security auditor in my previous life. And I remember at least one case in which I penetrated a large network through a smart doorbell, you know? So really, I think that had to happen first. People had to understand first that if we don't take care of this, we will have problems later down the road. Especially since we also found out with the first wave that mitigating security flaws like we're used to doesn't really work that easily in IoT. We can't just go ahead, you know, like git push push out a new version of a piece of software to something that is, you know, laying around in somebody's kitchen. You know, so really the awareness has raised both on the customer side, on the consumer side too, and within the on the manufacturer side. But that transition had to happen first. And I really think it was basically a parallel development between the people who make the devices and the people who use the devices, that unless we take care of these things quick snap, we'll have a lot of troubles further down the road.
Yeah, I agree. So David, with what we heard from Fabio, Jan, and Siobhan, do you think that there is a need for an industry-wide consistent approach to IoT device security? And if yes, how that can be done?
Yeah, it's interesting actually. When Jan was talking, I was kind of furiously nodding and being very polite not to interrupt him. But I think we've kind of, so first of all, I don't know, it seems like, as you know, industries have to kind of learn from their mistakes. So I agree with that comment. You know, you sort of, it was very exciting to connect, you know, things to the internet, and you know, for that journey that we've been on. But we go back to the scale. So to achieve scale, and the fact that you are scaling services which are revenue generating, which carry liabilities, which have corporate identities attached to them, you know, the cost of failure will scale as well. So I think that's kind of the anchor point for I guess for the audience as well, is to think of it the other way around. So the cost of failure will scale with the industry scaling, and actually each time we fail, the market shrinks a little bit because people lose confidence. So we need that confidence, and that's security's role. The second thing is that when we talk about cybersecurity. We're kind of, I guess, as a broad population, we've been educated through the traditional sort of, IT and PC world where you're used to getting an update patch. And that's why I was nodding furiously with Jan, because we have this mentality that security is a bit of an afterthought, that, oh, there was an issue, so I'll download the latest patch. And that is kind of correct. But I think what people struggle to understand is that security has to be built in from the beginning. So right from the beginning of the product development. And that's from the beginning of the silicon development. So we have something which we call a root of trust, which effectively is a part of the chip where all of the secure operations take place. You trust the root of trust. It's where you store your secrets. It's where you perform your cryptography. Everything is anchored in there, and that's in the heart of the chip. So the chip companies build that. And then the OEMs make use of that. So they have a part of the chip that we call the normal world. And then we have a part of the chip which we call the root of trust. And where we see the opportunity is for, alignment and certification and common best practice around how devices use that root of trust. And that root of trust then anchors the trust of the product right the way through to that at scale kind of liability, if you like, that you have millions of devices that are born with a root of trust. They have a secure life cycle. They can be updated. You can download patches. You can download updates, but it's very different to the IT world. It's very different to the PC world that we're used to. And so we see great opportunity for alignment there. And actually that lines up with a lot of what we're seeing with government standards and regulation as well, where they're saying, okay, you should have a device that can be updated. It should be supported by the manufacturer to have secure updates. It should have some concept of a secure root of trust. And, by the way, don't do things like ship it with default passwords and that kind of thing. So there are sort of very basic best practices that we can fix really quickly. And there are other parts which, require true collaboration from the silicon right the way through software stack and OEM in order to make that work. I don't know if that answered your question, but it kind of linked, I think, to the point that Jan was making with the life cycle of the device.
No, very interesting view. In fact, I fully agree with you around cost of failure. In fact, we have been talking to various OEMs, and everyone is worried about liability and risk. And that they talk about brand, they talk about reputation, they talk about operational risk, they talk about legal risk, right? And that leads to a high failure cost, right? If not done right or correctly in the first place itself.
Yeah. And maybe just to finish on that, you have to remember the lifespan of the device as well. I don't know, maybe, Gio, Fabio and Jan can comment, but, we tend to think of, 10, 15 plus years of lifetime for these devices as well. So you're creating a kind of a legacy that you have to maintain and live with as well as an OEM.
Yeah. So with this, I think let's get into our first poll. So for everyone, the question appears in the poll tab on your screen on the right-hand side. So please provide your response by answering the question if you have not done it yet. So we will have about 30 seconds to do that now. Perfect. So it looks like everyone has answered it now. So the question is, what do you think is the biggest barrier to developing robust device security? And 13% says high cost, 40% says lack of expertise and understanding, 20% says fragmented standards and regulations, and 20% says security hasn't been a high priority. So this might be an open question to the panel. Do you agree with the poll results? And what is your approach to these challenges?
So in general, I will have to say I agree. The lack of expertise and understanding, unfortunately, really is a factor. And that is something that where I also have to say the security community really has to put their running shoes on. We so far we've done a pretty bad job at knowledge transfer. I find, the ultimately this attitude that security is the security guy's job, that really has to go. The basic security, or the basic questions of bringing security into software development must be something that belongs in the basic vocabulary of a developer. And that is definitely not where we're at this stage. And that also means we must hand them useful tools that actually make their jobs easier, and give them best practices so that they know what they have to do in order to not make a wrong turn. As we just said, when you have device lifetimes of 10, 15 years, taking a wrong turn can really, really hurt. And then you put this load of please make this device secure on a developer without giving them proper direction. That's just unfair. And it's an unrealistic expectation. So unless we provide them with a tool chain that makes their lives easier, and with a set of best practices that they can just adhere to, we're not doing our jobs right.
So what's your view, Jivon?
Well, I agree very much with Jan, but also I see the challenge I see is the way traditional product development design. I'm sorry. Well, security is not so easily integratable. So just like Jan said, we need to build tool chains. We also need to train like OEMs and ODM. So security can be easily integrated into customers' design and products. So for that, we actually need to change how traditional business model works.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I think, David, when you were explaining, you also touched on the fact which is standards and regulations. So I believe that the standards and regulations are pretty fragmented at this moment of time. When I say fragmented, it's not across geographies, but it's also across different industry verticals. So what's your view around these fragmentation around standards and regulations, and how this is becoming a barrier to build the robust device security?
Yeah, it's I'm always in two minds, actually. I guess it is a barrier, but it's also serving a purpose of, growing awareness. Because if you're an OEM shipping into a particular region and you have some regulation to be mindful of, that's a very hard forcing function. If you want to supply into a certain market, that's a hard forcing function. Now, different markets and different, governments are taking slightly different approaches. I think there's two parts. One is a sort of a industry self-regulation, which we're perhaps not always great at, but agreeing on and defining and working towards what we regard to be best practice is important. When you actually open the lid and have a look into all these regulations, actually they're frustratingly similar and written in very different ways. So, if you boil it down, you do get back down to, following best practices. Okay, there's different levels. Some devices perhaps have to have, very hard protection against physical attacks. Other devices have to have protection against, large scale software attacks. There are different, depending on the use cases and the markets, there are some differences, but actually there's more commonality than difference, I would say. And we do see, so I think, particularly the work with ETSI and 303645 here. So I'm based in the UK, and the UK government has, kind of worked closely with what's going on in ETSI, and they're following that. And I think that's a good example. I think NIST in the US, another good example with what they've done around some light touch regulation. I think it's all in the right direction. And I think that, we continue to move in this sort of best practice versus, you must, which is the regulatory approach. And I think that we continue to operate in that scheme. I think the third axis to that is actually the corporate cost of failure, which is interesting. So, I kind of once had a very cynical boss that said people either do things through greed or fear, and actually it's kind of, perhaps with security it's the same. So you can embrace security and use it as a way of increasing perhaps your average selling price, and sort of having a great kind of premium experience to products, but also through fear, through a growing recognition of corporate loss if you get it wrong. I can also see another forcing function, which is the ability to serve a market, and I think regulation is kind of playing around with that a little bit at the moment. So it does bring opportunity for sure.
Exactly. So maybe coming back to you, Fabio, would be interesting to get your view around high cost, because whenever you are building a product, cost will be definitely a parameter which you will consider. So maybe I will frame the question differently. How do you compare cost versus security? And security is still seen as a cost or a mandatory requirement?
Yes, that's a question that I always ask to our product management and the people that really go and sell our products as well. Sometimes from our customers and from our internally as well, from our people that do the business, security is seen as a cost. It is. It is, however, an opportunity for us to actually turn it into a competitive advantage. So it's not like we want to sell systems that are not secure, of course. But security can take a form of conveniences also for customers, to make sure that they get information about what's going on in that network through our devices. So a cost, it's something that is without doubt, a little cost on a device may turn out to be a very important competitive advantage, and of course a way to sell more of our devices. Is the cost higher than a little higher than not having a security in your devices or in your processes? Yes. Is the cost a impossible barrier that that you have to a really big obstacle? No, I don't think so. The most important point here that I would like to convey is that when you build your processes in a way that security is taken from the beginning and is built in rather than bolt on, the cost of creating a system or a device that is secure is not so dramatically different than the cost of creating a system that is not secure. And perhaps it's even less at the end of the day, if you consider the entire life cycle, the amount of patches that you have to provide, the amount of recall that you have to do, the amount of things that you end up, or the damages from a brand perspective, or from the actual reinstallation of things that it is, rather than building it secure in the first place. So imagine a situation in which we have devices on top of a bridge, and it happens all the time. We have a brand called Color Kinetics. They build architectural lighting for us. Color Kinetics does all this thing, this nice colorful lighting, and we have installed it on many bridges. Sometimes you have devices on these bridges that are on top of the pillars of the bridge, and to go and replace them because they have been hacked, it's dramatic cost. Not only the replacement cost, but also the fact that you have to to close the bridge for perhaps half a day and divert traffic into some other solutions because you have to replace a device over there. That's not a good idea. So I'd rather go for situations in which the system is built as secure as possible from the beginning, from the conception, from the architectural phase, from the threat modeling phase, so that you go through the entire process and you have at the end something that can be upgraded from remote and make it secure as much as possible in the first place.
Yeah, that's a very interesting. In fact, I have been in discussion with various OEMs where they were discussing, in fact, not discussing, they were debating whether they should invest few cents now in the BOM cost and make it ready for future or leave it. And then the issue is that they might be rebuilding the product in a couple of years. Yeah. Okay, so now with this, let's go into our second poll. Again, the questions appear in the polls tab on your screen on the right-hand side. So please provide your response by answering the question if you have not done it yet. So again, we will have 30 seconds to do that now. Perfect. Looks like everyone have answered it now. So the question is, how do you know you have good enough security? And 56% people say that third-party evaluation and certification bodies. 38% responded to methodically developed security frameworks, and 6% say internal process and evaluation. So I will again put this open question to the panel. Do you agree with the poll results?
I would let me answer the question for a second. I would have answered all of the above, except including no concrete way of assessing, by the way, but all of the above, yes. I think it's very important to have a methodically developed framework and a security development lifecycle. And the security development lifecycle includes a number of phases, and some of these phases are, of course, a certification of the product and third-party evaluation. Some of these phases are basically how to build the product right in the first place. So yes, all of the above.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, exactly. This is not mutually exclusive, you know. I do think, however, I've been doing some long, hard thinking about this, and I think the main reason why solid third-party evaluations and certifications might actually be the game changer is that as of now, we don't really have any objective measure, you know. Right now, if you ask somebody, hey, are the devices your company sells, are they secure, you know, I mean, the level of trust I'd give into that answer is just about the same as if I went to a used car salesman and asked him, is this a good car, you know? So obviously, you need some form of confirmation. And really, if you have a concrete standard with concrete checkpoints, which are concretely verified, you do have a certain factual basis for the trust that you put into something, which is a quality criterion and should be treated as such, I think, you know. In terms of how you actually get that into your shop, you will definitely need methodically developed security frameworks. You know, you still need a secure development lifecycle in order to get there. But I think these are basically two sides of the same coin. You know, you need to do it right, but you also need to prove that you do it right.
Yeah, I agree with Fabio that it's all. So maybe before we get into Q&A, any last thoughts or suggestions or recommendation to our listeners?
So from my perspective, I think the answer to this question is listen to your customers. We try as best as we can to listen to our customers. Our customers these days, from our perspective, requires us to really be careful, take steps with respect to implement secure systems. It used to be different. It used to be customers were more interested in costs. They are, of course, they still are, but you can't now develop and deliver a system that is not secure for your customers. So listening to customers also helps in moving things internally. At least it helped for us. So you get feedback from customers, and you show this feedback to your R&D community, and they understand even better than why it is required for them to follow those pesky trainings on security, why it is important that they really follow the processes that allows us to build a secure system. You go to your product managers, and they also see the customers requiring this kind of solutions, and therefore we are better prepared in delivering this kind of things. So yes, my first and last to just here listen to the customers.
Similar to what Fabio just said, I also want to say, try to find partners, because security is really difficult and complicated. And SDT were not really security professional in the beginning, but we got help from ARM, PSA. Like ARM provides like TFM and TFA program. Those programs really helps building firmware and software safely and securely. So yeah, and if you actually do some searching, you can actually find pretty nice and friendly security consultant in the field, and who can help you building whatever product you need.
Yeah.
SDT can help you as well.
Excellent. And Jivan, I think you touched a very interesting point, that whose problem is this? This is not a single problem. It is all about building up an ecosystem and trying to solve that problem via an ecosystem.
Yes, ecosystem, yes. Partners, ecosystem, yes.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I would really advise, and I know I sound like a broken record because I say that all the damn time, but really is invest in your people. Like the best bang for your buck, the best value for money in terms of security is what you get out of investing into in your developers, your R&D community. Like help them understand security better, give them the right tools, and make security an integral part of how they build the products. The one thing that I see a lot is, and this is usually like the first phase of maturity, is that people are testing their products and they see they have security problems, and that is very often important for like the first level of understanding. But you cannot properly test security into a product. That is not how it works. You really have to take this into account from the beginning and have to follow with it through the product life cycle. Otherwise you will always end up with patchwork.
Yep. David, any last thoughts from you?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say I kind of totally agree with what the others are saying, that actually the kind of with the poll, all the answers are really important, actually, all of them, and actually if you take it top down, I think the reinforcing the business need for security is important, because then you have a way of understanding the value of security. So security is not a traditional feature. It's not a bell or a whistle, to use that analogy. It's a pillar. It underpins your business and your ability to grow your business and your service revenue. So that's number one. I think the cost can be amortized across the market. And so Guillaume was mentioning some open source initiatives that are running around the root of trust. I think the chip industry has a responsibility to deliver secure silicon with a root of trust, with an independent certification. And we're on that journey. And I think we're making good progress on that journey. And then the electronics industry is able to then pick that up and use that, which is the journey of education and awareness and increasing the skills around that. So I think linking those things is critical. The business need to the ability to actually deliver it. And it's definitely not an afterthought. It's from product conception. You need to be thinking about security.
Yeah, it's all about security by design. Yeah, agree. Okay, so let's move into Q&A now. We have got very interesting questions, so let's see how many we can cover in the next 10, 11 minutes. So let me start with the first question. It's from Elon. He's asking, how do you implement end-to-end encryption and the distributed key management for IoT devices with low memory capabilities, limited computing power, unable to force read-write policy in the OS level?
I'll answer part of it.
Yeah, so
sorry. Do you want me to?
no, I'm sorry. I mean, I already typed out like a short version of the answer. That's actually that's more than one topic, you know. But I mean, first of all, if you're stuck with a device that absolutely doesn't support any advanced cryptography, and with such low capabilities that you cannot implement any of that, you're screwed. You need something else.
Yeah.
So that's just a harsh reality to accept, I guess. But in general, things are getting a little easier because we now actually have cryptographic algorithms and ciphers that at least use key sizes that are a little bit more manageable, with RSA, Gamal, and so forth. We really had huge keys. And with ECC algorithms, those get a little smaller. So the number of devices on which we can actually use proper asymmetric cryptography has definitely grown. The whole question of key management that's a whole different ballgame. That we could probably easily set up a whole session just about that. So one advice that I can give from the hip is, don't make your PKI a PC under somebody's desk. Be careful where you store your certificates and get that right from the get-go. You want to use an HSM.
Okay, so we move to the second question now. I can see that some of these questions are answered, but I will still read them. If anyone has got any additional inputs, we can add to that. So the second one is from Christoph. How do you deal with intelligent edge security? Do you use TPM or Azure Sphere? And how do you handle different connections like LTE or WLAN?
I answered this question already. Well, SDT has many different ways we can choose for device security. Like if you want like special chips, then you can use TPM or HSM. Or if you just want to do the security on your MCU or MPU, then we use TFM or TFA certified or compliant chips. Or we also use PSA certified chips. You can find the list from PSA certified website. And how do you handle different connections? Well, it's not a simple question, but you can handle them with the solution that I just described in the previously.
Thanks, Javon. The next question is from Sacha. I see that Jan has already answered that, but let's see if we have got any more inputs. How do you tackle the cost factor? I think we have discussed this pretty much. He also says, I have seen edge initiatives fail because of 7 cents per article. How does someone make a good business case if edge also mean that cost per device have to scale down significantly?
Yes, I think I've talked about cost during the previous minutes, but let me try to give also a slightly different answer here. Yes, cost, it is a factor. Sometimes it's unavoidable. It is not like, initiatives that fail because of 7 cents per article. I know how it is. We make lamps, and 7 cents per article on a lamp is sometimes too much. So you have to be creative. Perhaps some of the things that we do move some of the security aspects on a gateway side. Yes, I know it's not really IoT, but you can manage that. On the other hand, as I said before, listening to the customers and listening to the willingness of customer to pay more or to differentiate and sell more, that also helps. Our customers also requires, for instance, as I mentioned before, they require us to be certified. So they require, it's also a cost. It's not per boom. It's a cost that you take as an organization. I think it's a lot of education on the management side as well. You as a security professional, that's pretty much 50% of my job, trying to educate our management that what means the cost. It's not something that you solve it easily. Sometimes it is more expensive, but everything, every feature, every single things that we do has a cost. And it is also that cost is going down. It's still going down. So what you can buy today, a processor with TPM and with security, is probably what used to be 5 years before a processor without that. So, I mean, there is hope.
And I agree with you, Fabio, it's all about education. But along with education, I would also add that it's about awareness. And at some time, it's also about cultural shift or cultural change also. Yeah. So the next question is from Amani. What is the best simulation tool used to check the IoT authentication protocol?
Well, I answered for simple simulation, you can use Postman, but if you want to do something more complicated, then like I don't know any simulation tool you can use.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. It kind of depends on which protocol you're actually talking about. So I'm gonna hazard a guess we're talking about MQTT. And for MQTT, one of the things I can recommend if you wanna play with authentication and stuff is MQTT Pwn. It's spelled MQTT-PWN. Can I write this in the chat? Like this. And for instance, also Metasploit has a MQTT authentication scanner that you can use.
Okay, thanks, Jan. Thanks, Shivam. The next question is from Hari Babu. Do you have a solution that deploys edge devices with zero touch? Just connect to network and it should do the rest.
Yeah, I answered that question, and there are a few different ways you can achieve that goal, and it really depends on what kind of servers or cloud you're using. But fortunately, lots of IoT specific cloud services are providing this. So like if you want to know like actual commercial solution, just contact me by LinkedIn, and I'll give you more concrete answer, because we have 1 minute right now.
Yeah.
So like let's go through fast.
Yeah, I think we are closer to the time. So what we will do, we will take these questions and respond back over email. So anyhow, with this concludes the webinar presentation for today. So thank you so much for joining us, and thanks again to Generalitat de Catalunya, the Government of Catalonia, Ministry for Digital Policy and Public Administration. So as I said before, please reach out to any of our panelists on LinkedIn or Twitter if you have got any additional questions. Thank you. Stay well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.